The following podcast is an enticing media production.
Where the Nell have you been? Join us for conversation about life, business, and everything in between. Welcome to What the Nell, where we've got stories to tell. Here's your host, Nell Tice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of the What the Nell podcast with yours truly, Nell Tice, and my co-host today, Steve Trott. You all know Steve very well, I'm sure by now. He is the co-owner of M&T Builders, father of 9, yes, I said 9 children. You're also a volunteer firefighter and all of the things. Very hard to get a hold of, so I'm very very lucky to have been able to nail Steve down for this time frame today to record. And we are also welcoming our very special guest today. She is the Lancaster homegirl. She's a real estate investor and author of Money Girl, Attract Wealth, Nurture Your Soul, and Obtain Financial Freedom. Welcome to the podcast, my friend, most importantly, Christina Diehl.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited because we did a podcast together like a couple of years ago now, I think, maybe a year or two ago, I'm not sure, but we talked about financial freedom, the importance of educating kids, especially about finances, the things that you're not learning in school, stuff like that. So I'm really excited to talk about today's topic with both of you as we continue our Don't Follow Me series. We're discussing hustle culture today, which is, I would love to get to know you guys, your opinions about this. So my first question to start us off with is, what is your reaction when you see a post on social media promoting hustle culture?
Let's hear it, Christina. Let's hear it.
I'm first.
He was actually like following his own rule of letting Christina answer first today.
Ladies first, I guess. That's the benefit here. Well, first, can you kind of say like what, or do we make assumptions about this? Like, what is hustle culture? Should we already kind of have an understanding? Like, if I see someone promoting that, like, what do you mean by that?
So hustle culture, actually, this is a really good way to get started. I think it could possibly mean different things to different people. So to me, hustle culture is the promotion of kind of like the work while they're sleeping mindset. Grind it out every single day, always be on, be available, be working. When everyone else is sleeping, I'm working. That whole type of idea of, and then also the goal is to make as much money as you possibly can, be super rich, and just work to the bone, to the point where you sacrifice happiness and your own freedom and your own fun.
Yeah. So I definitely, if I see anyone promoting that type of lifestyle, especially long term, I'm not a fan of that at all. I definitely went through a time in my life, I mean, probably a decade or so, where I was working all the time with certain goals in my mind and making sacrifices and doing things that a lot of people won't do in order to secure their like long-term financial freedom. But in my mind, it was a very finite period of time where I was working towards being able to leave that behind and being able to just have the freedom of my own time and the freedom of my life to be able to, use it how I want to rather than just working all the time.
Love that.
No, it's good. It's good. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, Nell, your definition summary was great. And for me, I can't stand it because it's the take no breaks mentality. And I can't stand to see, definitely not support, but to see and even connect the dots with someone that falls victim to that mentality, because what they don't realize is they oftentimes will work themselves to exhaustion. It leads to mistakes. It leads to minute issues that show up in the world that they don't realize that if they didn't live by that culture, they could solve some of their own problems. And sometimes in life, we've all learned, we've read it in books, we've seen it everywhere. You have to allow yourself the opportunity to catch up mentally, physically, nutritionally. People that say, "Oh, I don't take vacations. I need," you owe that to yourself, and that's what ultimately helps you be successful.
Mhm.
Um, I hate to say it, but hustle culture to me is temporary. The people that you see living that lifestyle, they usually hit at some point. They hit the wall. They hit the wall, and it leads to
Mhm.
failures. It leads to big issues or large mistakes and things like that.
Interesting. So, hustle culture to you is temporary. Do you think that it's possible to be long term at all?
Well, when I say temporary, it's I would use the word phase. So for some people, it could be 1 year. For some people, it could be a decade. For other people, it could be their life between 20s and 40s, could be 20 years or longer. Maybe they work their entire adult life with hustle culture, but then when they get close to that retirement age, they realize, oh my gosh, I missed out on all of these other things in life. And
Mhm.
could they have lived life a little differently?
Mhm.
Um, and I guess to that point is it really truly applies to people in different ways. It depends what you do, where you work, that maybe it's where you live. Depending on where you live, pro- produces a different mentality. If you live in New York City, guess what? Hustle culture is in your cereal bowl. If depending on where you're at, it affects you differently, I would think.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, how do you feel about that, Christina?
Yeah, I think there's so many variables that can go into whether or not you feel some type of urgency to just hustle, hustle, hustle. And I think one of those can be um your responsibilities. Like how many dependents do you have, Mr. I have 9 kids person over here,
Hey,
as
hey
opposed
now, hey now, hey now,
as opposed to
relax
me,
there.
like my biggest concern is keeping my plants alive. And I don't even do a good job with that. But so I don't have this like I don't have a pressure on me to accomplish more and more and more and make sure that I have enough to provide for the people around me. Um, so, so I was able to turn it off when I accomplished enough, from hustling for a little bit. I was like, okay, cool. I can sit back and just enjoy this now. Whereas I feel like if you have more pressure, either like Steve said, based on where you live or all the other variables that could go into it, you might not be able to turn it off. You might always feel
Right.
like you need more and more.
Mm, that's
So,
true.
yeah.
Well, I think there's a magic word that comes to mind that I think tricks people into a mindset, and that's greed. When people experience hustle culture and then they experience a little bit of success that comes from that hustle culture, that greed mentality can take over, and it traps them in that culture where for some people it is very temporary, but for other people they get stuck, and they're stuck with it, and it's hard to get away from it after a certain period of time, I would
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, I agree with that too. What is one thing that you both of you would suggest to do to start shifting your mindset from the must always be hustling to wait a minute, I can actually have a little bit of freedom. What is one thing that people can do to start to shift that mindset?
So
Mhm.
I think a way to set yourself up to not feel like you always have to be hustling is, because I'm a huge fan of this, keeping your expenses low.
Hmm.
And then in addition to that, making sure that you have passive income. If all of your income comes from hustling, then you're always going to be hustling. But if you can take some of that income to create you know, producing,
Hmm.
assets and things like that, it takes some of the pressure off of having to always be working to make more money because your money can just be making more money for you. And then of course, yeah, if you live somewhat minimally, don't have extravagant expenses and be just smart with how you spend your money, that's also going to help wrap your brain around like, okay, I don't need to be hustling all of this time.
Yeah.
And I think on a kind of a different, you know, aspect or from a different, viewpoint is giving yourself some grace and understanding that, you have to enjoy life and take care of your physical and mental health too, as importantly as your financial health and finding that balance by realizing the importance of those things.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we hear
That's
it all the
good.
time. You can't pour from an empty cup. And I think that's a really great explanation of one step that you can take to get into that mindset, because it's something that everyone can do. No matter how many kids you have, no matter how many dependents or where you live, it's something that everyone can do. You can take some income and you can invest it somewhere to make it start working for you. So, Steve, what's your one thing?
So I'm going to give you two things
Oh.
because Christina took my one thing. No, number one for me was to tell people to be smart financially,
Mhm.
to make good, sound decisions financially, save money when you can, be prudent with your expenditures, etc. But we'll skip to number two because Christina nailed it. Um, Number two for me is accepting failure. Understanding that when you hit the wall, you do not have to hustle more to correct your
Mm.
problem, but you have to sit back and you have to reflect and you have to understand. And part of that accepting failure for me is having a plan. You need a short term plan, a mid-term plan, a long term plan. And if you're a planner and you can plan your day, you can plan your week, you can plan your year, you can plan your next 10 years, maybe your plan doesn't exactly hit per se the way you wrote it down. But if you're planning and you're constantly thinking of it, that can keep you from hustling because it will remind you that you need to plan certain things into your life. Plan in your breaks, plan in to spend some time with your kids. Do, yes, I have 9 kids, and I know kids keep coming up on this episode, which is great, but you have to make the people around you part of your life, or your hustle culture works you right out of their life. And
Mm.
too many people spend their adult careers working too much, and then they have to look back and regret things. So
Mm.
that number one, financially, number two, accept the fact that you need to, your plan won't always work, accept the failures, but keep planning and build yourself time that allows you to not feel like you're forced to hustle.
Okay. So, Steve, coming from somebody, and we do keep bringing up kids, so I'm just going to bring it up. Do you feel like you are a part of hustle culture? Do you feel the pressure sometimes, even just a little bit, or do you not at all? Like, where do you stand on that?
You know what, for me, for the last many years, I do feel it. I think it comes and goes in waves like a roller coaster.
Hmm.
Um, because for instance, 2 weeks ago, I had a crazy 10 or 12 day span. My business partner was away on a trip. Our One of our employees wasn't feeling well, and like everything seemed to be building against me. It was tax season. It's our insurance audit was up. There's all these different things that were happening in my life, and I'm like, for that period of time, I felt like I was forced to hustle,
Hmm.
but it was short term. And for me, I was allowing myself to manage that because I just planned it out. I did the best I could. And sometimes that works out well, sometimes it doesn't. But there are times, winter, I own a construction business. So cruising into the winter, I do find myself sometimes in the mentality that I have to hustle. Maybe we're trying to finish a project for someone that's for Christmas, or we're renovating a house that they've got family coming in for the holidays, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
Those instances do pop up. But what I've learned over the years is if we do rush, or we do try and cram things, or we pile things on top of each other, it usually leads to a worse outcome. Something
Hmm.
gets done by mistake, or something's missed, or a material's incorrect, or all the things that can compound each other. Next thing you know, you have an unhappy client versus just making that plan and letting it run its course of time, working with the client on your differences and having them understand, hey, I'm sorry, we're going to miss your deadline by a little bit. Here's why. Let me help you work through it. It usually ends in a much better result.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a part of my life. I see it in my extracurricular activities
Hmm.
because I'm committed to many different things because I love to do it, but at the same time, it's hard to fit it all together in the perfect puzzle in my life. So
Yeah. Okay.
it
I get
it
that.
comes and goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. Christina, do you ever feel like you are sometimes sliding into hustle culture, or like, do you ever feel any pressure from, and if you do, where does that pressure come from? Or do you not, which,
Mhm.
we'll get to.
No, I definitely don't. And it's interesting because I've often said I feel like the reason why I set up my life the way that it is, through, my income coming from passive resources was because I'm the laziest person in the world. Like stupid stuff. Like I don't know. I want to be able to pay someone to clean my house. And I
Mhm.
I don't know, like all the things I try to make my life as easy as possible because I am lazy and people don't believe that because of what I have accomplished, but it's the the motivation behind accomplishing these things was that I am in fact lazy. And so now I
I
I
love it. I love
This is
it.
so good.
so now that I can be lazy, I feel no pressure to go back to working all the time
Mhm.
and stuff like that. I mean, granted, I'm a realtor and I love helping people buy and sell homes. It's something I'm very passionate about because of I fully understand the impact that owning real estate like can have on people's lives long term, the benefit, the financial benefit for them. Um, so I love that, but at the same time, I in no way feel like hustling around trying to find clients and get people to, work with me and things like that because I just am enjoying, the freedom time that I have, time
Amazing.
freedom. Yeah.
That's amazing. So let me think about how I want to word this. So how would you describe feel like your life now versus your life when you were hustling? So obviously you condone this lifestyle, but what are some things that you notice that have changed in your shift? Like what are some benefits that you've experienced?
So, benefits, I think it can range anything from whenever, a niece or nephew wants to hang out, or I want to have, be able to be there for a friend that needs me, or um, I think, being a good friend and being a good family member is way easier when you have the freedom of your own time.
Mm,
Like I've definitely noticed that, and I'm so thankful for that. Um, and being able to prioritize going to the gym. I do that way better now than I did when I was busier working. And I've noticed big changes just because of that, being able to work out consistently, and not having to get up at, 5 o'clock in the morning in order to be able to do that, which,
mhm.
a lot of people that are working all day, they have to fit in their workouts in the morning. And I was like, not okay doing that, but now I can work out whenever I want. And so my, physical health is probably the best it's ever been. And so those are just probably two, things that I've noticed that are different now than when I, had to commit more of my time to
Yeah.
working and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can say, I mean, I'm not necessarily, there are times when I do feel like I have to submit to hustle culture for sure, especially as a newer business coming up. And, because when you're first starting, it's like every client, I have to get everybody as a client because every client
Mm.
is good and all clients make or bring in good money. And that's not the case. I've learned that. So I think Steve and I are in similar boats as far as business ownership. When the hustle culture kind of creeps in a little bit, you have to make those difficult decisions sometimes to let people go or, shift your schedule around because it's in a similar light. I can create my schedule the way that I need to accommodate not having to get up at 5 a.m. to work out and things like
Mhm.
that. But I still have to find time to fit it all in. So it's a little different in that sense. But I mean,
And I think even in real estate, that's a prime example of if people are in that hustle mindset and they need to sell homes, they'll end up working with clients that they know are going to be a nightmare.
mm,
And when you've removed yourself from that hustle mentality, you can see a client for what they're going to be and decide, hey, I can refer you to someone else, or this isn't going to be a good fit. And it just enhances your peace of mind and your quality of life by being able to choose who you want to work with, just like what you said.
100%.
100%.
Yeah, I knew Steve would agree with that. That's yeah, I
We
mean,
deal with that.
hustle culture completely clouds your mind. And I have had clients in the past that have contributed to the hustle culture mentality or of, oh, I forgot to request this. Can I get this tomorrow? Or, that type of thing. And constantly having to submit to that and wiping things off the calendar to say, no, this client needs this. I have to do this and I can't do this. And then that adds stress. But yeah, absolutely. I think that hustle culture definitely clouds in being able to make good business decisions. And yeah, so Steve, you mentioned that you've dealt with that. Do you deal with that as often now?
Not as much now, but I would say if we turn the clock back a good many years, there were times where we found ourselves maybe considering projects with clients that we would not typically pick as a client.
Mm-hmm.
So there are times where that culture creeps into your mindset and you're like, no, no, we need jobs. We need jobs. Let's get this on the map. We'll figure it out. But
Right.
when you can, quote unquote, pre-screen and select your clients, it changes that entire process.
Totally.
And there are people that my company will not do projects for. And typically it takes those first couple, maybe it's the first phone call, or maybe it's after you talk to them a couple times, you start to get a feel for what's their real budget. What agendas do they have set inside of their plan for their project that doesn't meet our standards, or we know we can't. And I don't want to say meet their standards, because typically it's the other way around. Typically it's someone that wants the Mercedes for the price of the Chevy Cobalt. It's like, I can't give you that custom kitchen for what you want to spend on it. And that's usually where that conversation comes up. Where in the past, we would hustle through that. We would work through that estimate. We would try and make it work. We would figure out numbers. And at the end of the day, if we get those jobs, at that moment, we know it's going to be a headache the whole way to the finish line. Where now it's like, okay, no reason to hustle for that. We'll find a way. There's enough people in the world that want to pay for good service, and we move forward. So it's a great point. I mean, and I think the financial part of it comes into play, because you mentioned it earlier, but if you're hustling because you haven't maybe been 100% smart with your finances, and you have these expenditures that have racked themselves up, and every day you're sending a bill payment in a different direction, you are forcing yourself to live that lifestyle. And that's unfortunate, because I mean, it's become normal in this world to live in debt, and it's unfortunate, but everyone chooses to live in debt. They have a car payment, there's a TV payment, there's a Netflix payment, there's a payment for everything now, and they shouldn't be living that way.
No, but I mean, I think that there's, Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are certain good debts to have.
Yes.
Not
Any
necessarily
debt that's making you money, I think is, as long as it's done correctly, it's a good thing. But yeah, the debts that are just costing you money every month, of course, that's something people should avoid. But it's so common nowadays. People think that everyone just lives in debt. It's not true. A lot of people do, but it's not. You shouldn't do it just because you think
not everyone. Right.
Yeah, we had a couple of friends that we don't see too often anymore now. And I hate to say this, but I kind of love it, because every time I went to their house, like, it was just this beautiful, big, brand new house, amazing outdoor space, everything you could ever want in a house, like in this area. And we used to go and we'd spend time there. And every time I came home, I would say to Kenny, oh man, like, it would be so amazing to have this and have that house. And then basically it's like the keeping up with the Joneses thing. And then I'd have to talk myself off the ledge. Like, no, we don't need that. It's not for us. Like, we don't have to have a house that looks like everybody else's and the whole 9 yards. But at some point, yes, a lot of people do live in all kinds of debt. And that's become the way of life. What is it? The American way is the saying. So how do you I think the three of us have a really good grasp on the mentality of living within our means, maybe even a little under. And how do you think it's feasible to stay away from being pulled into the rest of that belief system? What do you think that is?
So I think Hey, I'm going first, Steve.
Yeah.
I know. I know. I held on to it. I held on to it. I did good. I did good.
I think the sooner you can really grasp and understand that the guy that's driving around in the $100,000 car is probably in tons of credit card debt, doesn't have much savings, is stressing about how he's paying his bills every month, and and yeah, and has a lot more worries than the guy that's driving around in a paid off, whatever it may be, Toyota, and has, a good cushion put away in savings, and is not stressing all the time about money.
Mhm.
Once you realize that it's just because you don't look rich doesn't mean you are not rich. I'm not wording this correctly, but I hope you know what I mean. Just like a lot of people want to look rich, and if you want to look rich, you're not wealthy. It's usually the people that are wealthy that are walking around in, a white t-shirt and jeans and don't have a care in the world.
But
So that's, I think, yeah, when you can get comfortable with just like not wanting to look rich and realizing people that want to look rich are usually not, then you win.
totally, absolutely agree. Steve,
Is that what Steve was gonna-
you almost cut Christina off, so you must have something to say about it.
Well, I knew Christina was going to dive right into the financial sector because that's her game and she's so good at it. But the flip side of that, to add to it, it's who you put in your circle, and it's who you hang out with, and it's who you associate with. And I think that's the biggest key in the world, that if you want to live hustle culture, go hang out with those people. If you don't want to live it, make sure they're not in your circle or in your influence realm, that because you will pick that up. Like you said, keeping up with the Joneses. If you live in a neighborhood and your neighbor cuts his grass on Thursday afternoons, and then you decide I got to take a half day off on Thursday because I need to cut my grass first, just to be the first one on the block, that's that hustle culture mentality, and who you associate with will drive that bus.
Totally
If
agree.
you're hanging out with those folks on the weekends, you're going to adopt more and more of that mentality. And I think that's a huge piece of it.
Okay. All right. I love it. So since we've
But
kind of
hold on.
Oh,
No.
okay.
You're asking a lot of questions today. When is let's hear Nell Tice's version. Let's dial it back a little bit. And I want to hear how you mentioned it briefly because you associated with being a business owner and stuff. But tell us more about how hustle culture keeps creeping into your life and how it's creeped into your life in the past, and even past business experiences that you've been a part of recently have added some of that culture to your life. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, I think when you said it's about people in your circle, I mean that hits like the majority of things that I've experienced, because I can attribute that to experiences that I've had that have sucked me back into hustle culture. I worked for someone that was, I mean, hustle culture was like should have been their middle name. So like that mentality came onto me, and she kept telling me I didn't have a sense of urgency. And I use air quotes for urgency because urgency was just another name for hustle culture. And I didn't know it at the time. So, of course, when I'm working for someone else, I have no choice but to operate on their time schedule and their expectations. And I think that built up so much inside of me. And then understanding my own personality from a business perspective, where I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I can do this myself, work for myself. Sorry for the exterior noise. It's just too nice today to not have the windows open. But yeah, like I can do this for myself. If I'm going to hustle, I'm going to hustle for me. So that was like the first step in it. And then when I started this business journey, I definitely had that new business mentality of, oh my gosh, I got to take on every client. I got to go find people. I have to do all of this. And I've got the schedule. And I was working with a coach at the time that was like, I need to see this from you every day. And I need to see these results and this and that. And I'm like, okay, great. As long as I get in the right mindset, I'm good. I'm just going to, grind until I can't grind anymore. work while everybody's sleeping, that whole thing. And then I was like, wait, hold on. I don't remember who it was where I was introduced to, it might have been Stacy Roski. I don't remember, but I saw a post from somebody, a coach, that was basically promoting the alternative to hustle culture. And I was like, so there are people out there like this?
Mhm.
Wait, you mean I don't have to do this? Hold on a second. And then I started learning about when doing the business stuff. Like, I didn't know that I would like the business side of business so much because I was the creative person behind it. So, I started doing QuickBooks and I started learning a lot about taxes and KPIs and ROIs and all the financial things. And then I was like, wait, you can make money work for you. And there was a whole thing with my previous job and getting my retirement and savings and everything out and into other accounts and things like that. So I'm finally on track with that now and investments and things like that. So it got me really excited to think, man, if I can prepare now, like to make money in my sleep, I think I'll be much happier because I've got the business thing now and I can create my own schedule. And if I'm making money on the side with this, like, man, that sounds like ultimate happiness.
Mhm.
And I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out, but I definitely didn't have the right people in my circle.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think that I
Full,
base that a lot.
full circle experience as you sit here and do a podcast with two people that you know pretty darn well, and
Well,
it's interesting to hear you say that.
I think that I've done a lot of work in the circle aspect.
I think you
And
have too.
yeah, clearly. So yeah, no, I'm really grateful for um the people that I've now surrounded myself with, and they help me be a better person. I mean, you two are both obviously a huge astronomical part of that, and I can
Well, I
only
will
hope
say,
that I can provide that same type of value to you guys and everybody in my circle too.
oh, I think you can. And one thing comes to mind as I heard you go through that. It takes me back to an episode we recorded maybe a year ago, but it made me think that something else that induces hustle culture a lot is people that can consistently think that they need to announce to the world what they're doing. They always think they need to announce their next big move. And when they do that, they're inducing themselves into that hustle culture because now they've set the bar and they've told the world what they're going to do. But at that moment in time, they don't have a plan. They're not sure how it's going to work. They don't know if they're going to get there. And I still look at that today as a negative. You do not need to tell the world what your next big plan is or what your next big move is. Live your life, set your own standard, and make those goals achievable. And then let your work speak for itself. And I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle that can help someone maybe not get trapped into that hustle
Mm,
culture mentality. Don't
okay.
let so many people in the world feel like they're out there judging you, waiting for you to hit that mark because you've already told them that's your plan. Don't
Mhm.
don't let that pressure build from outside your walls.
Okay, I love it. Now to counter that a little bit, I don't necessarily think that you need to like stand on the rooftop and announce it to the world, but I do think that you need to tell some people in your circle to keep yourself accountable.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Accountability is always good. Accountability is good.
That's what Nell, I mean, I think you know this about me, like what my current goal is. I have a very specific financial goal, and I've told, a couple of my close friends, so that they can help me
Mhm.
stay accountable to that, and also so that they can cheer for me when I do accomplish it. And I definitely think that's important. I mean, I don't generally announce big things on Facebook that I want to, feel like I'm bragging about or something.
Right.
But I do think that, yeah, telling people, on a smaller scale what you're trying to do is definitely
Mhm.
important when you are trying to hit goals.
Yeah, it totally is. And it's also a really good way to take inventory too, I think, because I've had some people in my life before where I have told big things or ideas to, and certain people react a certain way. And there are those that maybe towards the end, they're not either happy for you, they can't share in the accomplishment, or you find out they're not listening. And they're supposed to be the people. This is part of the reason why you tell people it's, I say, like, if I did have some sort of big financial goal or something like that, and I told you that I didn't want to go out to eat for a month, if I went to that person that I told this goal to, and I said, hey, let's go get something to eat, and they're just like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever, it's Saturday night, let's go. They're supposed to say to me, no, bitch, you said you
Yeah.
didn't want to go out to eat for a month. So let's cook something up in the kitchen and watch a movie.
100%. Yeah, I've been on both ends of that, of, trying to help hold a friend accountable when they do something similar, like, hey, let's go out to eat. And I'm like, no, you said you weren't doing that. And then also, yeah, being the person that maybe wavers a little bit, and then the friend just allows me to go do something that I said I wasn't going to do. And it's a good way to realize who, can really hold your feet to the fire and who can help you accomplish the things that you want to accomplish.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It
Steve, what are your
teaches
thoughts?
well, listening to you two, I'm thinking we've experienced that between you two. So maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But I will say that it teaches you the standards and quality of those other people that are in your life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what are their standards, and what level of standard are they holding themselves to? That if they're that flexible, you need to rethink how closely they're connected to your circle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's super key to your success and your future. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. That's a key to your success.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, I mean, it's character. It shows you who they are. Is it the kind of energy that you want to be around you? And yeah, it's like I said, it's a great way to take inventory.
And I think one thing, and I think Nella shared this with you recently too, because it doesn't make the people that don't think the same way, it doesn't make them
No.
bad people, or it doesn't make
Oh,
me
no.
not want them in my life. One thing that it made me realize was, oh, not everyone thinks this way. Oh, my
Mhm.
brain works a little bit differently in regard to, you know, whatever it may be, whether it's goal setting or sacrifice or something like that. Like, oh, not everyone is wired that way, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It'd be really boring if we were all wired the same way. But that was definitely a recently eye-opening thing where I was like, oh, people just don't get what I'm saying when I'm like, I'm going to do this now, and here's how. I don't think they fully grasp it.
Yeah.
And nothing
Yeah.
against them, but yeah, because everyone's different.
No, totally. And that's the key. That's the thing too. I I don't want to say that I put relationships into buckets, but it's kind of like a bucket thing, I guess, because I sometimes I need like very clear lines in the sand. And we lost Steve. No, there he is.
That was
um
Sorry.
no, I totally agree, because I definitely, I know that, not everybody thinks the same way. I think it would be really, really boring. And it's also supposed to be that way where we just are all very different. And I think that if any, I don't want to use labels. Maybe buckets isn't the right way to say it, but I definitely have people in my life too that I understand where they are, where their thoughts are, and maybe we don't align. But that doesn't mean that I don't respect them or don't want to not have them in my life at all. It's just like a day-to-day thing. I consider my circle is like the interior portion of who gets access to what goals and what things I'm sharing with, I guess, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
It does. It does. I think, and to the point you're making, it lets you know too, and it reminds all of us that we ask certain people certain things for a reason.
Hmm.
Those buckets, those filters, so to speak,
Hmm.
depending on which category that person may or may not fall into, are you going to take certain questions to them? Probably not.
Right.
You select very quickly the people of reason in your life, depending on the advice that you're seeking.
Hmm.
You know already who you might want to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it folds back to a little bit of that culture mindset, because if you ask the wrong person the question, it can induce that culture that we're trying to avoid.
100%. All right. So I'm going to ask one last question to wrap up. Okay. So what is the definition of rich to you? And do you consider yourself rich?
Am I first again?
Absolutely.
Oh man.
Absolutely.
Um, to me, the definition of, and I hate the word rich. Can we say
Mm.
wealthy?
Yeah, let's do that
I don't know
instead.
why it just feels different. Um,
Rich describes like sauces sometimes. So it's kind of like an all-encompassing,
we can talk sauces if you want.
right? Well, that'll be a different episode.
Um, to me, wealthy is when you are financially independent. Like maybe that seems extreme, but when you don't, yeah, when you don't have to depend on using your own time in order to make money, trading your time in order to have the, means to pay your bills. That could mean that you only make $50,000 a year, but that's all that you need. To me, that's still wealthy. You're wealthy if you can use your time the way you want to. And so, yeah, I consider myself wealthy and blessed. Yeah. And I don't know. That's it.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. Steve, it's your turn.
Yes, Steve's turn. A different answer, a very different answer, and hopefully an answer that listeners will appreciate. But wealthy to me directly relates to happiness. So, happiness for me could mean living paycheck to paycheck, but feeding 9 kids and having them be happy and having everyone else in my circle of influence be happy. And if that happiness unfolds itself to all the tiers that I wish to affect in my life, then that to me can relate to a life that I could call wealthy. Now, most people, yes, wealth, financial. Yes, it has that. And I don't disagree with what Christina said. However, the life that I chose to live may not ever reach that status per se, the way it was described. And I'm okay with that. Because if I can live a life that I can be happy with and produce a future that takes care of the people I wish to take care of, then to me, that's living a life of happiness. And I can consider myself wealthy because wealth to me does not have to always be monetary. It could be having the right people in your life at the right time, the right gifts in your life for the right reason, whatever that may be, could produce a wealthy and happy life.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes my frustration might tell me, no, that's not the right outlook, Steve. Let's go make money. But at the same time, if I'm hustling to make money, am I creating happiness in my life? And I think there needs to be a balance there. So
yeah, I agree. I would almost say that I'm kind of in between both of your answers, where I do now understand the wealth of not having to constantly trade time for money. I also understand the wealth behind happiness, because to me, wealth anymore doesn't mean making $500,000 a year. It used to. Um, but I think that I put more value into relationships that I have and connections because I can focus more on where I put my time because I have control over that now. And that makes me happier. And I don't necessarily have certain numbers that I would say would make me feel wealthy. But I could tell you that I count on my relationships in my life to make me feel wealthy. So I think I put more emphasis on that than versus the finances in regards to wealth. And yeah, I would consider myself maybe not 100% wealthy, but definitely on the path. Definitely.
What would need to change for you to describe yourself as wealthy?
I think that I need to make a few more investments. I really do. And I love the fact now that I don't have to look at someone's house or someone's car and think, oh man, like that's what I need to feel wealthy. I think that in itself helps me feel wealthy. Like I've
Yeah.
done some personal growth and wealth and mindset changes to be able to understand that that's not what makes you wealthy. And I think that, yeah, if I made a few more investments and made some other moves, I think financially, then maybe I would feel 100% wealthy. But yeah,
It's good.
yeah, I love it. So, well, thanks guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I love how this kind of turned into like a what is wealth type podcast. But I think that hustle culture directly relates, because I think that we can all sit here and say that we feel wealthy, but not because hustle culture rules our
Right.
lives.
Right. I mean, the flip side of that coin, for the many people that will listen to this, you can either let money drive your life, or you can plan your life and let the money evolve the way it should evolve.
And
Because
drive
again,
you.
if you're making good sound decisions, you can attain that wealth in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're letting that money drive the bus, you run the risk of falling right into that culture that we're talking about.
Love it. Awesome. All right, you guys.
Good
Thank
job,
you
ladies. Good
so
job.
much for being here. And of course, as always, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, wherever you're listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the video. We appreciate all of it. That's how we grow here at the What the Nell podcast. So thank you so much for everyone tuning in. And as always, I will catch you on the next one.
To learn more about how to tell your story, connect with Nell at enticingmedia.com. That's ENTICEING media.com. Thanks for listening to the What the Nell podcast.